Now, everybody knows that the Mangler 1 and 2 is one of the greatest 1-2 punches in horror history. But could this third film go on and turn this thing into one of the greatest trilogies of all time? I am, of course, just joking. The first two films are pretty average, and every instinct in my body was telling me that this film would struggle to even maintain that standard. Now, if you are a little bit frustrated with my continued obsession with all things Mangler, let me put your mind at rest and inform you that this is the final film in the Mangler franchise. So after today, we can move on and cover other unremarkable pieces of Stephen King fluff. As to why they didn't go on to make any more after the Mangler Reborn, my guess would be that they simply didn't want to spoil the legacy established by the first three Mangler movies. That would be my expert summation. Interestingly, they bring back the killer laundry press for this one. So in the second movie, it was an AI virus that was killing people, but this time they've gone back to Old Faithful. So to give you an idea of the plot, we've got this middle-aged guy called Hadley. He lives with his wife, and one day this guy, he buys the wreckage of the Mangler from somewhere, brings it back to his basement, and he embarks on a bit of a restoration project, trying to put the Mangler back together. But halfway through this process, the Mangler possesses him and gets him to kill his wife. There will be spoilers today, by the way, but all of what I've described so far happens in the prologue, so don't feel blindsided. After this, the Mangler persuades Hadley to go out into the world and kidnap a bunch of women, bring them back to the house, and while they're still alive, feed these women to the Mangler so the machine can stay well fed or well nourished. But Hadley has a habit of kidnapping the women too quickly, or at least faster than the Mangler can eat them, so he likes to put these women into the various rooms around the house. And what this means is that throughout the movie, these women can embark on escape attempts, but it won't be easy because a lot of the doors are locked and a lot of the windows are bricked up. It's a difficult thing to get out of this place. So even though we are bringing back the laundry press machine, this feels nothing like the police procedural horror film of the original. This one is more like films such as The People Under the Stairs and Don't Breathe. I even caught a little whiff of The Collector about this movie. Insert your own film about people struggling to get out of a house once they are in it. Now, to give you the names of the two directors for this, we've got Erik Gardner and Matt Cunningham. I tried to find out a bit of information about these two online, but other than the fact that they both have quite a lot of writing credits, I couldn't find out very much about them. But it seems to me that neither one of them have ever directed a movie other than The Mangler Reborn. Not a good sign. Now, in terms of the actors for this, I'm only going to give you the name of the final girl, or the woman who plays the final girl. That would be Aimee Brooks, who you might remember from Critters 3. She starred alongside Leonardo DiCaprio in that movie. So this is a woman who has a bit of experience when it comes to threequels, but I would suggest that her performance in this is not that great. She struggles at times to generate the required levels of distress, although I might be being a little bit harsh. There's no point mentioning any of the other actors. You're unlikely to have heard of them, and I would actually wager that even Critters fanatics would struggle to reel off the name of Aimee Brooks. As to whether they could give you the name of Leonardo DiCaprio, on the other hand, I'd give them 50-50. I'll give the film one positive while I might still have your attention, and that would be the machine. I really like the Mangler in this film. Now, they couldn't get the original prop from the Mangler 1, and they clearly didn't have the budget to recreate the prop from the Mangler 1. But if you think about it, how would Hadley have rebuilt that thing in his basement anyway? I mean, the original Mangler machine was huge. There's no way anybody's fitting that in a basement. Plus, when you think about it, the evil spirit in charge of the machine parts, it's more likely to get this guy to rebuild the machine more in the evil spirit's image, because the original machine was first and foremost a laundry press, and people just happened to be able to die at its hands. But this spirit in this film has ordered Hadley to rebuild it more as just a death machine. I mean, there's no laundry press function on this thing this time around. It's just a metallic thing of pure death, and it looks kind of freaky. It's got this like giant mouth on the front with a conveyor belt leading into it. It looks like the metallic version of the Sarlacc's mouth from Return of the Jedi. It looks horrible, and it's got these arms that have got like knives on them, and they're stabbing down on the victim as they're slowly going into the machine. I would hate to die at the hands of this thing. It looks absolutely horrific. Much worse, though, sadly, is the character of Hadley himself. He's a really boring guy. I've not seen a more tedious villain than this since I watched the Prom Night remake about 3 years ago. And to make matters worse, the actor playing Hadley has tried to add a little bit of extra flavour to the character by doing these weird glum expressions. So every time this guy has any kind of setback, let's say for example he trips over a shoe in the hallway and then corrects himself, he'll do this expression that's a little bit like an upside down smile. It'll go something like this. And I'm just thinking, ugh. I mean, this is not a proper expression for sorrow. It's like something a child would do in primary school if you asked them to demonstrate what unhappiness looks like. But I wouldn't expect a professional actor to use something like this. This guy, he looks like he's trying out for Mr. Wilson in a Dennis movie. It looks no good whatsoever. Another thing I don't like about this movie is that the first 30 to 35 minutes are so cheap looking. Like, I'm willing to bet that this film does not have a very high completion ratio among people who have tried it out on streaming, because the first act, it's full of bad setups and dodgy acting, and the production design is so shoddy. I mean, for a while I was sat there thinking, oh my god, why did I let myself in for this? Clearly I hung around for one Mangler film too many. But then you get to the main bulk of the action and things really pick up. The production design quality goes up. They saved all the best stuff for the second half of this movie, but I just think to myself, well, nobody's still going to be watching in the second half. I mean, in this day and age when people will watch movies like this on streaming, you give them a half an hour like what you get in the first half of this, and people are just going to throw this movie away and watch something else. And if I'm honest, I might have done that had I not been planning for this review. So I was actually surprised when things picked up in the second half of the Mangler Reborn, and I actually got a semi-decent sort of horror movie, but that did not look on the cards for the longest time. The reason I compared the film with Don't Breathe earlier is because there are a couple of burglar characters who break into Hadley's house, but they just end up becoming extra victims for the machine. But when we're first introduced to these two, they're a father and son team, but they don't seem like criminals. That's what the weird thing is. They just seem like regular people who absolutely would not be indulging in criminal activity. But when we first meet them, they're sat in a car outside the house they're about to burgle, but they're not talking about the job in hand. They're having a conversation about cigarettes and smoking, and it all just reminds me of Pulp Fiction when Vincent and Jules are sat in a car talking about cheeseburgers and foot rubs just before they're about to go and commit some crimes in an apartment block. It feels like the writer of this movie is trying to tap into Pulp Fiction and have these villains just be so super chilled out that they don't need to talk about the crimes they're about to do. They can just natter about smoking and stuff. But the problem is there's no Tarantino-level dialogue in this film, so the whole cigarette conversation falls extremely flat. It's just 5 minutes of dead air where nothing witty is said, and you find out very little that's interesting about the characters. Honestly, they might as well have just got out of the car quicker and gone into that house so we can get on with the horror. Now, to give some credit where it's due, so one of the burglars goes into the house to begin with, whereas one of them stays outside as the kind of getaway driver. But when one of them goes in the house, it is quite a creepy sequence that follows, just watching this guy going around this darkened house. And I actually think that the movie should have opened with this. It would have captured the viewer's attention a lot better, because we wouldn't have known what the essence of the movie would have been by that point. Instead, we get this halfway through the movie, if we're still watching at this point. There's a great bit where the burglar turns a light on, and in the background we can see all these bloody handprints on the wall, where clearly Hadley has dragged women sort of up the stairs, but they've put their hands out and they've put their blood-stained fingers on the wall and left a mess and stuff like that. That was a nice touch, albeit the execution is not perfect because the blood stains are a little bit too bright red for me, as if George Romero might have done them. It's as if the production staff on this just all dunked their hands in red paint and then went, hey, let's just put our hands on the wall, but really quickly because we've got to get on with this thing. I think they could have taken a bit more care and attention with how they made the mess on the wall, but the idea is there at least. And there's another good bit that follows in the same sequence where the burglar, he finds all these wallets with money still in them, and at this point you can clearly see the cogs turning in this guy's head that they might have picked the wrong house. Something is seriously wrong here. But I liked that realization slowly dawn on this guy. And most of the action that follows this point in the movie is serviceable. People try and escape the house and die. The burglars try and get out of what they've got themselves into and they die. And it's watchable horror, I guess, albeit Hadley is very boring. But I don't like the end of this. Without giving away whether it's a happy or an unhappy ending, the thing that you really want to happen will not happen. You don't get to see Hadley fed into the machine. That, for me, was the only natural way for this to end. And the fact that you don't get that is kind of annoying. It's a bit like when you're watching Don't Go in the House and the fire guy doesn't end up dying in one of his own fire rooms. That's really disappointing as well. But on the whole, given where I was with this movie after the 30 or the 40-minute mark, the fact that I ended up getting any enjoyment out of this in the second half is still a miracle to me even now, although it's definitely the worst of the three, and it's not really a recommended movie for you. I mean, I've tried to be as positive as I can, but still, number 2 is the best of the Mangler films. This one, it's not particularly great. So normally at this point of the review I would show you my copy of the movie, but I don't have the Mangler Reborn in my collection, thank God. No, I watched this on Amazon Prime. This is currently free on there as long as you have an ongoing subscription, which I do. So this cost me no money, which I was very pleased about. So let's get to the Bag of Terror and find out how I'm going to score this. So we've got 2 bloody axes out of 5. That is down from the score of 3 out of 5 that I gave the Mangler 1 and the Mangler 2. So, yep, worst of the franchise. And I'm very pleased that we can now move on and cover something else by Stephen King. Now, I had been going to put Autumn in front of the camera again for this video, because there's a subscriber, is it Lady Cat, who's mentioned my dog a couple of times, and I was going to do it. But the thing is, I'm recording this particular review quite late at night and Autumn is fast asleep over there and I don't want to disturb her. So instead, I'm going to show off something that's not quite as cool, but it's the best I can do under the circumstances. So I've actually purchased a brand new Bag of Terror. Here it is. And it's actually a proper Bag of Terror this time, with actual horror on the front of it. Much better than the cucumber bag. But I'm not going to bring it in just yet, because I've noticed that I'm quite close to 1,000 subscribers. And I thought I'll introduce this once I get to 1,000. I think that'll be a nice time to make the transition and finally get rid of this daft cucumber bag thing. I'm also going to get rid of the axes. So when this comes in, I'm going to get rid of the axes and introduce like carving knives instead. So the idea is that every time I go up by 1,000 subscribers, I'm going to change the weapon for the Bag of Terror. So when I get to 2,000, if I ever get there, I'm going to challenge myself to come up with another weapon to go into the Bag of Terror, and so on. And we'll see how many weapons I can get through during the channel's lifetime. It might not end up being very many at all, but that's what's going to happen. I thought that could be something for the channel. So there we go. That's what's coming very soon. We're getting rid of the cucumber bag. But for now, thank you for joining me for the review of the Mangler Reborn, and I'll catch you all again next time. Bye-bye.